What happens when a state senator's son walks into Judge Judy's courtroom and threatens to end her career on live television? Brandon Whitmore, the 28-year-old son of powerful Senator Richard Whitmore, strolled into the studio wearing a $3,000 designer suit, a Rolex watch worth more than most people's cars, and the kind of entitled smirk that comes from never facing a real consequence in his entire privileged life. He was being sued by Mrs. Ezekiel, a 72-year-old immigrant landlady, for $8,500 in unpaid rent and property damage. But Brandon didn't know that Judge Judy had spent the previous night reviewing court records, police reports, and sealed documents exposing a pattern of behavior his powerful father had tried to hide for years. The threat Brandon was about to make would become the most replayed moment in courtroom television history. What Judge Judy revealed next would destroy his father's political career and prove that some judges cannot be intimidated. No matter how connected your family is, this entitled politician's son was about to learn that in Judge Judy's courtroom, your last name means nothing. Before the most devastating courtroom takedown in television history. Less than 5% of viewers are subscribed. If you believe powerful families shouldn't be above the law, if you think entitled rich kids need real consequences, hit that subscribe button. This story will shock millions. And you don't want to miss what Judge Judy does next. It's a Tuesday afternoon in Judge Judy's Los Angeles studio courtroom, and the bailiff's voice cuts through the quiet tension. Case number 4782. Ezekiel versus Whitmore. Mrs. Ezekiel enters first. A small elderly woman in a simple floral dress and sensible shoes, clutching a thick folder of evidence like it's her most precious possession. Her hands shake slightly as she takes her place at the plaintiff's table, her eyes scanning the room with nervous energy. Aware that this moment could determine whether justice exists for people like her, then Brandon Whitmore enters, and the contrast is stark. He walks in 15 minutes late, designer sunglasses still covering his eyes indoors. Expensive leather shoes click against the floor with the casual arrogance of someone who has never waited for anything. He ignores Mrs. Ezekiel, doesn't apologize for being late. And when the bailiff asks him to approach the defendant's table, he responds with a dismissive nod while scrolling through his phone. Judge Judy watches from her bench. Her sharp eyes miss nothing: the sunglasses, the phone, the body language screaming, "I don't want to be here dealing with these little people." She's seen this before. Rich, connected, never told no. Believing the rules for everyone else don't apply to them, Mrs. Ezekiel begins her story. Her broken English reveals she immigrated decades ago and has worked incredibly hard. She rented a 2-bedroom apartment to Brandon 8 months ago. He seemed nice at first, charming and well-dressed. When she asked for references, he simply said, "My father is Senator Richard Whitmore," as if the name meant something. It didn't, but she rented to him anyway because he seemed responsible. The first 2 months, he paid on time. Then month 3 arrived with excuses. "My father's campaign needs money temporarily. I'll pay double next month," but next month never came. Month 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 zero payments, $6,000 in unpaid rent. When Mrs. Ezekiel tried to collect, call him, or visit the apartment, Brandon's responses went from excuses to threats. Then she discovered the damage: holes punched in the walls, broken cabinet doors, cigarette burns scarring the carpet despite the no-smoking clause in the lease, graffiti in the bathroom, and $2,500 in damages to property she had saved for years to purchase. She filed for eviction. But Brandon's expensive lawyers tied the case up in court for months, draining her with legal fees while he continued living rent-free in her property. Today, Mrs. Ezekiel is seeking $8,500 plus court costs, as she tells her story with quiet dignity. Her voice breaking when she describes working 3 jobs to afford the repairs. You can see genuine pain in her eyes. This wasn't just about money for her. This was about justice. This was about whether the law protects everyone equally or just people with powerful fathers. Brandon Whitmore sits at the defendant's table, looking supremely bored by the entire proceeding. His sunglasses still on, his phone still in his hand, occasionally smirking when Mrs. Ezekiel struggles to find the right English words to describe what he did to her. Judge Judy's patience, legendary though it is, has its limits. "Mr. Whitmore," she says, her voice cutting through the courtroom like a blade, "please remove your sunglasses. This is a courtroom, not a nightclub." Brandon looks up from his phone with the slow, exaggerated movements of someone being asked to do something incredibly unreasonable. He removes the sunglasses with theatrical reluctance and sets them on the table. "Sure, whatever you need, Judge," he says. "Not Your Honor, not ma'am, just Judge," delivered with the kind of casual disrespect that makes it clear he doesn't think this proceeding deserves his full attention. The sunglasses come off, but immediately his hand goes back to his phone. Thumb scrolling through what appears to be social media. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Mr. Whitmore, put that phone away or I'll have the bailiff confiscate it." Brandon actually laughs a short bark of amusement that suggests he finds the entire situation absurd. "Seriously, I'm in the middle of important work here. My father's campaign doesn't stop just because I have to deal with this situation." He gestures vaguely toward Mrs. Ezekiel when he says situation, as if she's an inconvenience rather than a human being he's wronged. The audience murmurs with disapproval, but Brandon seems utterly oblivious to the growing hostility in the room. Judge Judy allows Mrs. Ezekiel to present her evidence, and the elderly woman does so methodically. She shows the signed lease agreement with Brandon's signature clearly visible. She presents a payment ledger documenting every missed rent payment. She has text messages where Brandon promised to pay and then never did. She has photographs of the damaged, brutal images that make it clear this wasn't normal wear and tear, but deliberate vandalism. As Mrs. Ezekiel speaks, her voice gains strength as she realizes Judge Judy is actually listening, actually taking her seriously. Brandon interrupts repeatedly. "That's not accurate. She's misremembering. That damage was already there when I moved in." Judge Judy's hand comes up sharply. "Mr. Whitmore, you'll have your chance to speak." Let Mrs. Ezekiel finish, but Brandon can't help himself, muttering just loud enough to be heard on the microphones. This is such a waste of time. When it's finally Brandon's turn to testify, Judge Judy begins with a simple question. "Mr. Whitmore, you signed a lease agreeing to pay $1,500 per month. Is that correct?" Brandon leans back in his chair with the posture of someone settling in to explain something to a child. "Technically, yes. But there were verbal understandings that weren't in the written lease." Judge Judy's eyebrows rise. "What verbal understandings?" Brandon's answer reveals everything about how he sees the world. That she understood who I was, who my family is, and that payment schedules could be flexible. The word flexible hangs in the air like smoke. Judge Judy's voice becomes quieter, which anyone who watches her show knows is a very dangerous sign. "Flexible. You haven't paid rent in 6 months. That's not flexible, Mr. Whitmore. That's theft." Brandon actually has the audacity to look offended. "Theft? Come on, Judge. Let's be realistic here. Mrs. Ezekiel is lucky to have a tenant like me in her property. Do you know what kind of tenants she usually gets in that neighborhood?" The courtroom gasps audibly. Even Brandon's expensive attorney, a slick-looking man in an even more expensive suit, closes his eyes in dismay at where this is heading. Judge Judy leans forward, her expression absolutely glacial. "What exactly do you mean by that, Mr. Whitmore?" Brandon, either too entitled or too stupid to recognize the trap he's walking into, actually answers honestly. "I mean, look at her. She can barely speak English. She should be grateful someone from a respectable family even considered renting from her. The exposure alone is worth more than the rent. The courtroom erupts. Audience members gasp and mutter in disgust. Mrs. Ezekiel's eyes fill with tears, though she holds her head high with remarkable dignity. Judge Judy's face transforms into the death stare that has terrified defendants for over 2 decades. But she's not done extracting every bit of Brandon's arrogance for the record. She pulls out the photographs of the damaged apartment and spreads them across her bench, where the cameras can see them clearly. Mr. Whitmore, explain this damage. Holes punched in walls, broken cabinet doors. Cigarette burns on carpet clearly marked as a non-smoking unit. Graffiti in the bathroom. Brandon waves his hand dismissively, like he's swatting away a fly. I had some parties. Normal wear and tear. That apartment was falling apart anyway. Judge Judy's voice could cut through steel. Holes in walls are normal wear and tear. Brandon doubles down on his entitled attitude. Judge, with all due respect, I don't think you understand how young people live today. That apartment needed updating anyway. I probably increased its value with some of the improvements I made. Judge Judy's expression suggests she's heard many stupid things in her decades on the bench. But this might be approaching the top of the list. You increased the property value by destroying it. Brandon shrugs with the casual indifference of someone who has never faced consequences for anything. Look, this whole thing is ridiculous. My father's attorney already offered to settle this for $2,000. She's being greedy, holding out for more. Judge Judy pounces on that statement like a predator spotting weakness. Your father's attorney. Why isn't your attorney offering to settle your debt? Brandon doesn't even seem to realize he said something revealing. Because my father handles these kinds of minor inconveniences for me. He has people for this. The courtroom goes absolutely silent. Even the camera operators seem to have stopped breathing. Everyone can sense something significant is about to happen. That Judge Judy is building toward something devastating. Judge Judy reaches down and picks up an unusually thick file folder from her desk, one that's been there the entire hearing. Unnoticed until this moment. Mr. Whitmore, she says, her voice taking on a tone that makes veteran court watchers sit up straighter. I did some research before this hearing. Would you like to know what I found? Brandon shifts uncomfortably for the first time, but his arrogance won't let him back down. I'm sure it's all public record. My family has nothing to hide. Judge Judy opens the folder deliberately slowly. Really? Let's test that theory. In the past 5 years, you've been sued by 4 different landlords. Is that correct? Brandon's jaw tightens slightly. I move around a lot. Not every landlord is professional. Judge Judy's smile doesn't reach her eyes. Or perhaps you have a pattern of not paying rent and destroying property. She begins reading from the documents in front of her. With each case she describes, Brandon's face grows paler. Landlord number 1. Marina Vista Apartments, $4,200 in damages. Case filed, then mysteriously dismissed 3 weeks later. Landlord number 2. Sunset Terrace Properties, $6,800 in unpaid rent. Case filed, settled quietly out of court with all records sealed. Landlord number 3. Riverside Gardens, $3,500 in damages. Complaint withdrawn after the landlord received threatening phone calls. Landlord number 4. Ocean View Estates, $5,200 in unpaid rent. Case sealed by court order. Judge Judy looks up from the file. That's $19,700 in damages and unpaid rent across 4 properties in 5 years. And in every single case, Mr. Whitmore, the charges were either dismissed, settled with sealed records, or mysteriously withdrawn. Quite a coincidence, wouldn't you say? Brandon's attorney finally speaks up, clearly trying to salvage something from the disaster. Your Honor, Those cases are not relevant to the current matter. Judge Judy's response is immediate and brutal. They're absolutely relevant to establishing your client's credibility and pattern of behavior. Sit down, counselor. She returns her attention to Brandon, who is now visibly sweating despite the air-conditioned courtroom. But here's what I found most interesting. Mr. Whitmore, I did some additional digging, made some phone calls to these previous landlords. And do you know what 3 of them told me? They were contacted by someone from your father's office specifying settlements in exchange for signing non-disclosure agreements, using what they described as very aggressive tactics to convince them that pursuing cases against the son of a powerful state senator would be bad for their business. Brandon's face has gone from pale to red. Those are private matters. You can't bring those up here. Judge Judy's laugh is sharp and humorless. This is my courtroom, Mr. Whitmore. I can bring up anything relevant to establishing the truth. And the truth is that you've spent your entire adult life using your father's position to escape consequences for your actions. But Judge Judy isn't finished. She pulls out more documents. Let's talk about some of your other legal troubles, shall we? Bar fight in college. Assault charges. Case dropped after Senator Whitmore made some phone calls. DUI arrest your junior year. Record expunged. Harassment complaint from an ex-girlfriend settled with a non-disclosure agreement paid for by your father's campaign funds. Brandon jumps to his feet, his cool facade completely shattered. This is character assassination. None of this is relevant. Judge Judy's voice cuts through his outburst like a whip. Sit down, Mr. Whitmore, or I will hold you in contempt. Every bit of this is relevant because it shows a pattern. Judge Judy continues, her voice steady and relentless. You've lived your entire adult life believing that your father's political position makes you untouchable. That every time you break something, hurt someone, or steal from someone, Daddy's power and Daddy's money will make it all disappear. And you know what the truly sad part is? Until today, you were right. Brandon sits back down, but the arrogance that carried him into this courtroom has been replaced by something else: fear. Real fear that maybe, just maybe, this time is different. Judge Judy turns to Mrs. Ezekiel with a gentleness that stands in stark contrast to how she's been addressing Brandon. Mrs. Ezekiel, did anyone contact you and offer you money to drop this case? The elderly woman nods slowly. Yes, Your Honor. A man called 2 weeks ago. He said he worked for Senator Whitmore. He offered me $2,000 if I signed a paper saying I would never talk about Brandon or this case. He said if I didn't take the money and drop the case, things could be very difficult for me. Said immigration could ask questions about my properties, about my taxes. Judge Judy's eyes flash with fury. He threatened you with immigration enforcement. Mrs. Ezekiel's voice is barely above a whisper. Yes, Your Honor. He said I should think about my family, about my grandchildren, that I should take the money and forget this ever happened. The courtroom is dead silent. Even Brandon looks shocked, suggesting he might not have known his father's people went that far. Judge Judy takes a deep breath. Mrs. Ezekiel, what did you tell them? The elderly woman's voice grows stronger, filled with quiet dignity that commands respect. I tell him, no. I came to America 30 years ago from Taiwan. I work 3 jobs, save every dollar, learn English, become a citizen, buy properties. I do everything legal, everything right. This country has law. Law is supposed to protect everybody, not just rich people with powerful fathers. I don't want money to be quiet. I want justice. I want the court to say what is right and what is wrong. The courtroom erupts in applause. Judge Judy allows it for a moment, then raises her hand for silence. She looks at Brandon with an expression that could freeze fire. Mr. Whitmore, you've just heard testimony that your father's office attempted to intimidate, and threaten a 72-year-old immigrant woman to protect you from facing consequences for stealing from her. How do you respond? Brandon's attorney stands quickly. Your Honor, my client has no knowledge of any such communications and cannot be held responsible for actions taken by third parties. Judge Judy's response is withering. Counselor, your client has benefited from these third-party actions his entire adult life. He doesn't get to claim ignorance now. Then Brandon makes the biggest mistake of his privileged life. He stands up, his face red with rage and humiliation. And everything his expensive attorney has been trying to prevent comes spilling out. Judge Judy's voice is deadly calm. Sit down, Mr. Whitmore. But Brandon is beyond hearing reason now. No, I'm done with this circus. You think you can embarrass me on national television? Do you know who my father is? Judge Judy stands as well, and despite being a fraction of Brandon's size, she somehow dominates the entire room. I know exactly who your father is. Sit down. Brandon's voice rises to a shout. My father chairs the Judicial Oversight Committee. He has connections at every network, every major advertiser, every media company in this country. One phone call and you're off the air. You think you're untouchable because you're on TV? My father will have this show canceled before dinner tonight. The courtroom gasps collectively. This is the moment, the threat that will be replayed millions of times, that will destroy not just Brandon, but potentially his father's entire political career. Judge Judy's voice could cut through steel. Are you threatening me, Mr. Whitmore? Brandon, too far gone to stop himself, doubles down. I'm explaining reality to you, lady. You're just a TV judge. My father has real power. Real judges, real politicians, real lawyers who actually matter. Your entertainment. And when my father is done with you, you'll be lucky to get a job on daytime radio. The silence that follows is absolute. The bailiff steps forward, ready to intervene, but Judge Judy waves him back with one hand. She's not done, not even close. Her voice when she speaks is quiet, but carries to every corner of the courtroom. Mr. Whitmore, I've been a judge for over 25 years. I handled family court in New York City. I've dealt with murderers, rapists, child abusers. I've been threatened by mafia associates, by gang members, by people who actually had the power to hurt me. And do you think a spoiled little boy whose daddy is a state senator is going to intimidate me? She pauses, letting that sink in. You just made the biggest mistake of your privileged life. Not only am I going to rule against you, going to make sure every second of your entitled tantrum is broadcast to millions of viewers.